Just thought I'd ask. I love it when people have never started a business and government going to tell business owners how to run their business, and they have no idea how to start a business themselves because they've all failed at everything they've done. It's a fact. People, we need some people that are going to get a hold of God. She's bitterness of soul. Her heart is crushed. Peninnah keeps torturing her. And no doubt Peninnah is outside playing with her children from time to time. And she can hear it, and it just breaks her heart. The devil's out there cavorting with all of his crowd. We got Gay Pride Day. We got abortion everywhere in the world. We've got liquor on every billboard you can find, on every TV program you watch. The devil is having himself a time. Hannah could hear it, or Hannah could hear it, but she kept weeping over it. We hear what the devil's doing, but don't give up. Don't give up. Notice something else. The Bible said she wept sore. Her burden consumed her. It moved her to the point that she had to get some relief in God. And people, we need that in our homes and in our churches. It's a shame we come to churches and the altars are dry and hell is filling with your children and grandchildren, nieces and nephews. Preacher, that's a horrible thing to say. It's a horrible reality, people. Dry altars lead to damnation of people. When's the last time we really got so brokenhearted over our people out in sin that we literally wept and cried about it? It broke our heart and moved us to the point we didn't even want to eat till we heard from heaven. Notice in verse 11, prayer will cause you to do things you normally wouldn't do. Notice what she does in verse 11. She vowed a vow. She made a vow she normally wouldn't have made. Her vow is very simple. God, you give me this child, I'm going to give him right back to you. Now, Ecclesiastes reminds us in chapter 4, verse 4 and 5, it's better not to vow a vow than to vow and not pay. So Hannah knew that. And Hannah's offering as sincere as she can, I will take him to the Lord. See, she's sort of like, if you will, flip back to Matthew 15. She's sort of like the lady that came to Christ with a demon-possessed daughter. Notice in verse 24, Jesus responds, but he answered and said, I'm not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then she came and worshipped him. She came, fell at his feet, and she worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. But he answered and said, it is not meet to take the children's bread and cast it to the dogs. She's a Gentile. She's from Canaan. She's not of the house of Israel. She had no right to Christ or the blessings of Christ, being outside strangers to the grace of God. Don't you understand? The bread belongs to the children, not to the outsiders. You think I stopped that woman? Look at verse 27. She said, truth, Lord. Lord, you're speaking the truth. I know you're right. Yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from the master's table. Don't those dogs sit around on the bottom, on the floor underneath that table, and wait for those children, even the master himself, to knock food off from time to time? And they're there to clean it up. She was not going to leave till she got a hold of God. She even had a debate with God for a few moments. And notice what Christ said in verse 29. Verse 28. Then Jesus answered and said unto her, O woman, what? Great is thy faith. Be it even unto thee, even as thou wilt. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour. Let me give you a short illustration in verse number 28. Be it unto thee even as thou wilt. You know what God did her? Charles Spurgeon says God signed her a check and said, lady, you write it out and fill it and I'll cash it. What do you need? I'm giving you a blank check with my signature on it. You fill it in and I will grant it. You know what? God's used to giving people blank checks he can trust. He has no problem with it. He reaches there and he writes it out and said, even as you ask. You think of missionaries going around the world and what it costs them just to travel. And God has to bring the money in one check at a time. One donor at a time to give them the amount of money to fly. Especially if you have a family. I mean, it's nothing for a trip over to cost you $1,000, $1,500. And if you have a couple of children and your wife, you have to take her along with you. By that time, you done spent about $8,000. And you got to find somebody to take you to the airport and drop you off, and somebody to pick you up on the other end. And I mean, people, it's a hassle. And it takes somebody that knows that God's going to be with them every step of the way. And that's what we find. This lady gets a hold of God and she's not going to let go unless he cures her daughter. Hannah grabs hold of God and not going to let God go unless he gives her a son. Verse 18, you see the last thing. She prayed till she got her assurance. And she said, let thine handmaid find grace in thy sight. So the woman went her way and did eat, and her countenance was no more sad. Why? Because notice what Eli said in verse 17. And the God of Israel grant thee thy petition that thou hast asked of him. You've asked, I've answered. Go on home and get ready. Start building the crib. Getting the sheets and the blankets that you need. Start stocking up on diapers. Because the baby's coming. Man, what could God do with mothers that prayed like that? Mothers that can get a hold of God. Mothers that just wouldn't be denied. It's sad, but I've seen this in this church among our own people. Parents that would dedicate their children to God and you never see them again. What a waste. What a waste. She takes Samuel to the temple and she drops him off. She goes and she checks on him every year. Samuel becomes the great giant in Israel. Because he had a praying mama. There's one thing I encourage you to do. Look at the situation that we're in as a people and a nation. And get a hold of God. If you would stand.